Today I wanted to talk about diagnosing ignition problems on a 1982 Yamaha xj550. I just picked this bike up, it wasn't running. I went through the whole rigmarole trying to start it just like I've seen everyone else on the internet. This problem in particular with this bike. So these techniques for diagnosing problems are going to work for any kind of cruiser bike in the early 80s, mid 80s. So hopefully, if this isn't your bike specifically, this is a 1982 Yamaha xj550 Maxim. If it's not your bike specifically, these tricks will probably transfer. But regarding this bike, I know that a lot of people had this same problem. So I'm going to run through how I fixed it, and hopefully you can pick up some stuff from that. So this is the problem you had, right? You stick the key in. Light turns green for neutral, you pull the clutch in, turn the engine to run, and never mind these wires dangling out here. You press a button, and it doesn't even make a peep. No clicking of the solenoid, nothing. Now the first thing I did, like many people, was consult the original owner's guide. If you don't have one, look for it on the internet. It's definitely there. This kind of stuff is very easy to find. And they have specifically chapters of, here, starter troubleshooting, and it'll take you through things, what might be wrong, how to test each of those things, relays, switches, kill switches, everything. If you have a voltmeter, you're pretty much good to go. There's also going to be a handy schematic of the entire ignition system, which is going to help out a lot. And it might look confusing, and you don't have to be an electrician to figure it out. You just look at the different connections, follow them around. You'll start realizing that here's the ignition unit. The coils will not fire unless the ignition unit is satisfied. Now what all satisfies the ignition unit? And you trace it back to see what might be the problem. Which relay? Starter circuit cutoff relay. Ground connection. Is the button connecting or disconnecting? Another thing that was actually the most useful thing to me was I pulled this off the internet. It's actually a color-coded wiring diagram for the entire bike, and this is specific to this bike. I'm sure you can find one for your bike, but it even goes as far as showing which pins of the connector are connected to which color wire. So if you see here, this makes things really easy. This is actually the ignition unit, right? Or the starter button. There's a blue and white wire. You may not be able to see that because of the light. There's a blue and white, a black, which is obviously ground, and then two red and white wires. If you look at the wiring chart here, you'll see starter button and engine stop switch. There's two red and whites, one blue and white, and one ground connection. So you'll see where all of those wires go to and where the issues might be. So now we're going to get into the specifics of this actual ignition system. This particular model actually has two off kill positions and one run, which is more complicated than most bikes you'll see, especially newer ones that just have either the engine's on or the engine's off. Now this is where I ran into trouble with my bike, is when you push the button, it creates a connection between the blue and white positive and the black or ground connection, regardless of whether the red wire, it's not in line with the red wire, let's just say that. This cutoff position between both of the red wires actually flips a relay under the seat, which will sever the connection between the battery and the starter. So it's more complicated because if your relay isn't working, or these positions, it's just these, I hope you can see that, it's just these two terminals here that completes the circuit. It has nothing to do with the actual button. It's not in line. So it could be the terminals, the wire, the relay, the connection to the relay. So now I'm going to show you how to kind of retrace your steps or check your math as your high school math teacher told you. Like I said, you can trace everything even down to the color code on this. So here's your start button. There's two red and whites, a black and a blue, right? And they connect into a connector that has the same thing. Then you can see them follow all the way over here to the start circuit cutoff relay. And that relay, what leads to it is a blue, a black and yellow, and both of the red and whites. Okay. So here's the whole wire harness from the motorcycle. You can see right here, I have it pulled up. It'll take a while to find, but you've got a blue, black and yellow, two reds. If you retrace these reds all the way up, you know, theoretically you'd find the connector for the start button. Here it is. Put it down right here. Here's the connector. Connects right in there. So when you hit this off, it triggers the relay to sever connection between the negative and positive, the blue and black. So whichever way you turn it, it creates a connection or severs that connection in the relay. So the first thing you should do is just to check and see if the relay is still good. So unplug it. Also, all the relays on this bike look like this. They're just gold cubes. Now what you would do is take two wires coming off of a 12-volt battery. You could just screw them right onto your motorcycle's battery and individually just test the different leads. I do, one on the negative on one connection and just go around. Put the negative on the other connection, just go around. Eventually, if it's good, one or a few of these positions are going to make a, and I'll show it's working on my actual bike, so I'll show you what the noise is like. But if you're not clicking when you're applying the voltage to it, then the relay is bad. And I'll show you what that click sounds like right now. So here's where that relay sits in its normal location under the seat. Now I have the key in. I'm gonna start hitting the kill switch. And you'll hear that relay engaging. This right here is where the actual connection to the ignition system is being severed when you hit the kill switch. It doesn't just cut the circuit up here. There's too much voltage going through here. You don't want that running through the handlebars. So that's where it is. Check it out. If it's working, we'll go up to the buttons and check those out. Now we're actually going to see if the start button creates a connection between the positive and the negative. So as I've said a couple times, it's like a single pole switch. It's either out and disengaged or in and creating the circuit. And it runs off the blue and white wire and the black wire, which you'll see coming out the bottom here at the connection clip. So you put your red in the blue and black in the black. Set your voltmeter to ohms. I have it at 10 times resistance. And then hit the button. And it should create a connection and you should see the ohms jump. I hope you can see that on there. So I press it. It's going up to 40, which is good. Okay? So we know the button creates a connection. Now one thing that might happen is that you press it and the ohm meter doesn't spike. That means that it's not creating a connection. So obviously it's not going to start your motorcycle. The circuit isn't being connected. The other thing that might happen with one of the switches I have is you put both leads in and it spikes right away, regardless of if you're pressing it. It's always in the full or zero resistance position. So that means that it's always connected. So you might need to look into that too. But if everything is okay, then you want to move on to the kill switch. Now, like I said, these two red wires on the kill switch stand alone because they only create a connection in the relay. So all you do for that is you just put a black in one and a red in the other, and switch it. And if the resistance is going up and down, hopefully you can see, that means that that switch is working. Let's see if I can show you. Oh, my lead fell out. So you know that switch is good. Now if you've diagnosed the relay and both of the switches, the ignition and the kill switches, and everything's right, then I think you can be pretty certain that there's nothing wrong with this apparatus. I'm going to show you something I did to bypass the blue and the black wire, because the button on when I originally got this was corroded closed, so it was as if it was always being pressed in, even when it wasn't. So I'll show you what I did to sever that connection. If you don't have another one laying around, you can do this, and there are a lot of different things you can do to bypass different relays and connections, and I'll run through that now, because if you're all good here, there's something different or probably something worse wrong with it. Now, one thing you can do to try and bypass the button situation, like I said, this one was always corroded, so I would turn the key and it would just start, you know, igniting, because it was as if this was pushed in. And even though it did start up, you can't have that, because your starter motor is going to be, you know, going to be running, and you can short the solenoid and the starter out. So what I did was I just cut the wire, the blue wire, out of there, of the button. So if you open this up, there's nothing, you know, the blue and black leads are just hanging there. And the blue wire comes out of the clip just like on the other one. And instead of going to the button, I soldered this piece of wire here, and it leads down here. Now this is really ghetto, I know, but it gets the job done, because once you complete the connection from positive to negative, it works. Alright, so I replaced that ghetto hot wired starter with the one we were just diagnosing over at my table. So hopefully I know what I'm talking about, and you'll hear that diode clicking, or that relay clicking again. Run position. There you have it. Now there are a few other safeties besides the kill switch that can fail on this particular bike. The way it's wired is it has to be in neutral to start, or it can be in gear, but the clutch has to be pulled in and the kickstand has to be up. So the three main ones are neutral, clutch, and kickstand, and I'll go through those with you right now. The clutch sensor looks just like this. It gets inserted into the clutch handle. The safety, when you pull the clutch in, the plunger comes out. So if you pull this out of the clutch, your bike thinks that the clutch is pulled in all the time. So that could be an issue if you're starting it in gear, but if you don't do that, and I always pull the clutch in anyway and start it in neutral, but you know, you might get it starting to run away from you. But this is another switch that goes bad, and it's just a positive and a negative. So you can take the voltmeter or the ohms meter and just test, you know, is it spiking and not spiking? Is there a connection? Now, for neutral, let me grab my key. The neutral light is wired directly into the sensor. So if you're getting the light, there's no false positive. Your transmission is in neutral. There's no way this light can be on unless it's short-circuited in a crazy way if the transmission isn't in neutral. Now, of course, the light could be burnt out and your engine could be in neutral, and you could go back to your schematic and find that. Let me turn the light back on. And find that where it is in the electrical system and, you know, shift it into neutral, and then that connection, regardless of if there's a light bulb, should spike in the ohm meter. Okay, now the kickstand safety, I had to bypass this completely too. That's what this little piece of tape is here. There's two wires, right? Positive and negative. Now this one, if the connection is connected or engaged, it thinks the kickstand is up. The way this works is when the kickstand goes up, it pushes the plunger in and out, and that's very easy to test. If you want to bypass it directly, just splice the two wires together. There's also a relay that it connects to too, so that's another relay that can go bad. But if you're in a pinch, like this started to go bad when I was turning, you know, left off of a avenue onto a side street. The engine cut out, and it won't start if this is severed. So I ended up just taking the stupid faulty switch off and splicing it together. Now it's never going to be an issue. Of course, if you tested all those things and they all seem fine, it could be something a lot more complicated than a faulty connection or a corroded wire or something like that. You can have bad spark plugs, bad coils, bad solenoid. There are plenty of videos on YouTube that can explain how to test for coil resistance and solenoid, how to jump a solenoid, how to push start an engine to see, you know, if the solenoid is bad or whatever. But I'm not going to get into that. I know that from the forums, this bike, and I'm sure every bike too, but because I was looking for this bike, everyone was having the same problem. You push the starter button, nothing's happening. Well, from the 3 different starter ignition apparatuses I've had, there was something faulty in each of them. That one that I just put on that starts, that was one where the leads for the kill switch they were corroded and they weren't registering. So I cleaned them up, screwed them back in. Now that worked. This one, like I said, the button was bad. And the other one didn't even come with a button. So there were plenty of reasons for this not to start with just the 2 main ones and then this other janky one. So the 3 ones. And then with the kickstand switch. If your engine is I'll just give you this tip. If your engine is starting, and then right when you shift it into gear, it cuts off, that is definitely the kickstand switch. So just splice that up or change the relay. So I'll try and get some links there. There's another video of a guy who's showing you how to do the diagnostics on the electrical systems with this bike too. I'll try and put that in the link, but I just kind of wanted to show my experience. It really was that easy. It was just the faulty relay leads were corroded. It could be that easy. Now you'll hit the starter button and you'll hear the solenoid engaging. Click, 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 click. Obviously all of the connections are correct, then it's a faulty solenoid. Or if it's, if it's turning over and it's not, you can't hear like a combustion, it's spark or fuel. So, these aren't that hard to deal with. You just kind of have to take the time. I know this thing like the back of my hand now, and it's really, you might look at this first and be like, oh my god. I'm not, you know, I don't have a PhD in electronics. They don't make those, but you know what I mean. But it's really simple. You just trace it, and once you see, of course now I can't find it. Once you see the, there we go, igniter unit, you can follow all the different ways that it could fail. And of course the igniter unit goes straight to the coils and the spark plugs. So you trace it all the way back to the button, which is right here. So have fun with that. Ask any questions in the comments. I'll see if I can help you out. As I'm doing more with this bike, I'll probably post more experiences I've had with it. So easy a dog can do it. For those of you who think that Wisconsin is like in the Arctic or something, I don't know where you're getting your information, but it's June 20th and it's 85 degrees and I'm sweating my ass off here. Today I wanted to